Again, I have no means of communicating with you, but God bless you.
I don't know. It's on a slight delay, though. I think it says thanks for tuning in. Stream ended 8 seconds ago, so it's on a slight delay.
Right
so let me refresh and see. I'm trying to keep up with it because it keeps obviously we keep creating new links.
Yeah.
People are enjoying watching real-time troubleshooting here. It's all good. There's a level of entertainment to just troubleshooting also. All right, let's do it, guys. Let's freaking do it. Hey, remember, we're gonna have some inside jokes about today for future streams, and only the people tuning in today will know about
them. The troubles, but you know, it wouldn't be a debut without some hiccups, right? So
absolutely, man.
Let's go in and get this started then. Thank you for those tuning in and those watching this on the rewind. This is our debut of Blood, Sweat, and Wax. We are here to provide you our perspectives about the UFC card market. We noticed that there was an absolute lack of UFC card market, this rhetoric, talk, whatever have you, opinions of the matter. And so what we want to deliver to you is not only the UFC card market, but also provide you some insights into like cards like tomorrow's fight, along with like something that we'll get into maybe later on, having interviews with actual fighters, talking about rolling, talking about conditioning. So without further ado, I just want to introduce this lovely panel. Jake, Paul, and myself will be helping to navigate the storm. But Paul, would you mind just introing yourself?
Yeah. So some of you may know me as Big Turnit or Turnit. Just really excited to be a part of this. So, like, honestly, that we saw a vacuum in just UFC talk, specifically around sports cards. I think just having this medium is we're excited about it. I know we're going to have fun doing it. I hope people listening in are going to have fun with this. We intend on doing this for a long time, and it's going to be dynamic. There's going to be different kinds of topics. Obviously, today we're going to talk a little bit about the market. We're going to talk about the card tomorrow, our thoughts on that. We have much more planned. We have a lot less technical troubleshooting plan for the future. But this is all very exciting for us. And just a little bit of background for myself. Some of you may know me and Little Turnit as streamers on Whatnot and all of that, but we really got started with Chicken, who's on watching. So shout out to Chicken. And we're just very excited to be able to talk through all this stuff, and we intend to engage with all of you. We'll have some more interesting ways of engaging with the audience in the future. But yeah, that's my intro. Roll, if you want to go next.
Yeah, sure. I'm Roll. Well, I'm Jake. Most of you guys know me as Roll. I similar to you, Turnit. I got into UFC cards around the same time, watching Chicken. Chicken had a big influence on me collecting and doing breaks. So I originally got in through Pokemon on Whatnot when Whatnot didn't actually have a UFC category. It was under other sports, and there were maybe 2 or 3 streamers at the time. So yeah, shout out to Chicken, and I'm really excited to get into it. Also, I think that there's definitely a need to talk about MMA as a sport instead of just the sport or the sports card world. But I think that this would be a good way to kind of merge the two, the actual sport of MMA as well as collecting and sports cards. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you guys pretty much know me on Whatnot as well, along with this fine crew. Been collecting MMA cards since Pride. So if you guys remember that, I'm an old school MMA fan, right? And I just can't wait to dive into it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about it. UFC 282 is tomorrow. It's supposed to be originally headlined with Yuri versus Glover. We know that's going to be out the window. But then before we get into the actual card itself, what are your thoughts about the light heavyweight division? What does this mean with Yuri now out for more than 6 months? Yeah. What does that mean?
So we've heard this a lot from people. First off, I don't think this kills the card. I'm super excited for tomorrow. I think it's a great thing for not only the light heavyweight division, but the sport in general. A lot of people are like, oh, this is terrible. Light heavyweight's so bad. It's like a carousel. The belt keeps changing hands constantly from one fighter to the next. I challenge that. I'm like, I love that. I think it's boring when you've got one or two or three top contenders, and there's really not a lot of confusion about who's going to be at the top. Maybe it changes hands once or twice. We saw Izzy lose to Alex, that kind of scenario. But light heavyweight to me is always interesting. There's a lot of drama. There's obviously some injuries, which you don't want to see. But having Yuri be injured for the length of time that he is, having that year of the fight, and I just saw this earlier today, that won the year of the fight, I think, award, which was voted on by fighters, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which absolutely to me, it was the best fight ever. I love Yuri. I'm sad to see the fact that, he's not going to be able to fight for a little while. He's one of our favorite fighters, and it's not just his personality, it's his fighting style. It's very entertaining. His card market, and for those of you that are following that, I mean, his cards used to be a lot more exciting. I think the price wise, people were after him like crazy. We've seen that with even before the injury, it was kind of dipping a little bit. And I wonder if it's because that fight was so close, but people have to realize that this guy hasn't lost in the UFC, right? He's very exciting. He's respectable. He doesn't have to talk crap or smack to get people excited about what he's doing. I think he's going to be around for a very long time. So from my perspective, even though I think the injury is going to hurt his card market a little bit, I think for light heavyweight, it makes things a little bit more interesting. Jan, you guys know Turnit's super big on Jan. We love Jan Blachowicz. We're excited about his chance to come back. We think that Glover fight was a little bit of a blip. I think the fact that, we have these two guys now going, Jan against Ankalaev, potentially, and I don't know if this is going to happen, but potentially we've got Glover fighting whoever the winner is. There's multiple ways that a European super fight could happen, hosted wherever. I think that would be tremendously amazing for the European fans, for the UFC in general. That would be a very exciting thing. And I know we're going to get into the Jan versus Ankalaev fight for tomorrow, but just in general, I think this is really good for light heavyweight.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Jake?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think this is the right time for this fight too. I think it's a good time to give Jan another shot at the belt. I think it's way overdue, in my opinion. I hope Jan can pull out a win here, but I think it's good for Jan and it's good for Glover if we're talking about shots at the belt. I think they're not getting any younger. They're already up in age, and I think that Jan, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's got a strong will. I'm really hoping that he can pull this win, but I think it's really good for the light heavyweight division. I think it's a better opportunity for Glover to get another chance against Jan if Jan does pull through. And even if he doesn't, I think they would probably fight again if Yuri's still out on an injury. So, it's really exciting. And then if we look at Ankalaev, I think, I think it's overdue for him too. He has how many fights in the UFC at this point? Several. Probably, I think he has 10 fights in the UFC. Yeah. So I think it's time for him to have a light heavyweight fight or a shot at the belt. I think it's way overdue, especially being 18-1. So,
yeah, let's just get right into the main card, right? So, when we have Ankalaev versus Blachowicz, needless to say, we know that Paul and Turnit are diehard fans of Jan.
His power.
But what poses a problem with Ankalaev, though, isn't necessarily his pace; it's his strikes, right? I mean, he doesn't need to take the fight to the ground if he doesn't want to, even though it's a sambo background, just like with every other Russian fighter out there. But then what poses a problem, right, is his kicks. So hear me out on this. Within the heavier weights, we're used to seeing knockouts through fists, through elbows, right? Derek Lewis is a prime example of that. Cyril Gane does throw kicks, but then we usually see knockouts more through his punches. But with Ankalaev, the way he knocks out people, I've seen pretty much have just been through kicks, whether they're front kicks or the roundhouse. And that's where I kind of feel like that might actually play to his favor against Blachowicz. What I'm saying that is, if you notice Blachowicz's stance, it's a little bit where he's leaning forward with his hands up, kind of inviting that front kick. I'm not saying he's going to get knocked out Couture did versus to Silva or Silva to Belfort, but we'll see what happens. I mean, Paul, what's your take?
Yeah, no, I was just watching, I forget the name, but it was Michael Chiesa was talking about the fight with Paul Felder. And I mean, they all think Ankalaev's going to win, which is fair. I get it. I think so. First off, I just want to start things off with, I know I'm biased, but I still think this is a coin flip. I think if it stands up, if it stays standing up, it doesn't go to the ground, which is very likely. Obviously, we know that Jan is not exactly the strongest with, getting on the ground. We saw that with Glover. That's obvious. I think there was some nerve damage there, which might explain that. But if we consider the fact that after that fight, he had more time to prep for takedowns and his ground game, and we look at like the Rakic fight, that second round against Rakic, he still was dominated on the ground. I love the guy to death. Okay. I don't think that Rakic didn't really do that much damage against him. It was fine, but I just don't, I'm not too worried that Ankalaev's going to go to the ground. So that aspect of his game and like the holes I see in it potentially, I don't think that's an issue. I think if it stays standing up, all of us are going to be happy as fans. It's going to be electric.
Yes, it will be.
Yeah. And I think Jan has an edge when it comes to striking with knockout power of his hands. I do think, Jiho, you have a good point with the legs and the kicks and everything. Although I do think that Jan is probably one of the stronger kickboxers in the division, period. His kicks were nasty. I mean, I'm biased, but I'm going to argue that his kicks are the reason that Rakic's knee gave out and all that, right? So I mean, maybe what we see happen, like to your point, is Ankalaev might mix in some of those kicks. I wonder what will happen if Jan's able to check strongly some of those, if that's going to like deter him from doing that. And then they're going to keep it at the fist level and kind of just striking from there. I think if that happens, then Jan takes it over time. If that doesn't happen, meaning like he's not able to successfully check them, you've got a little bit of like some wild card roundhouse kicks going, he backs away a little bit more, he's not pushing forward, then I think we see it kind of lean towards Ankalaev, which I'd be sad about, but I totally get it. I mean, these are two of the top guys in the division. So yeah,
definitely. I mean, Jake?
Oh, I totally agree with you. I think so there's some keys to a Jan victory and some keys to a Magomed victory, in my opinion. I think those keys for Jan are taking out Magomed's base. I think using leg kicks, using calf kicks in order to take out his base, it'll turn a wrestler weak. I think what's going to happen is Magomed may want to take it to the ground with Jan. As long as Jan has done his homework and has worked on counter grappling, I think that he can potentially pull out a win here. For Magomed, I think the keys to his victory, he's a precision striker and he's very efficient. And I think that's what really sets him apart from the rest of the light heavyweight division. He keeps his hands up. He makes every strike count. He's always looking for a target. And of course, his wrestling is right there. If he gets rocked, he can always take the guy down. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I'm really excited to see how Jan reacts to somebody like Magomed and how Magomed is able to, pull out a victory here if he's not counting on his wrestling. I really want to see how he striking gets somebody like Jan, especially after the Thiago Santos fight.
Yeah,
I think he was caught quite a few times. So
yeah, good call.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, man.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
And just from like, if I can just toss this in, guys, like if we think about just the market in general, being a Jan collector and kind of being pretty attuned to how that market's going, I think Jan has a solid base in the collecting space for UFC cards. You're not going to see cards going for exorbitant amounts unless it's like super, super short printed, 1 of 1 PSA 10, something like that, like a Grail card. Maybe then you'll see some people fight over it. You see that with like the color blasts from 2021, the debut color blasts with Jan in them. Those go for over 1,000 each time, even raw. But he's got a solid base. And regardless of how this fight goes, I don't see him going any lower necessarily because the people that are buying Jan are not speculating, in my opinion. You don't see speculation in there. It's true fans, it's people that like him. So, but if he wins, we might see some of that flow back in because there's an argument to be made that maybe he's going to have the right stuff to take a Glover, rematch, something like that. But even then, even if he wins, I don't see the needle moving that much because he is a fighter that's older. It's not, people are not speculating that he's going to have like this GOAT status type career. And frankly, as a collector, I'm okay with that, but I don't think it moves the needle too much, regardless of what happens for Jan. I think on the Magomed side, that is a rookie card that people have invested in pretty heavily. I think 2021, we saw a lot of that. It's slowed down a little bit, to be honest with you. And that's mainly because I don't think he's been fighting as much. He doesn't speak natively. He doesn't speak English that well. Well, obviously he's from Russia, but like even he was using a translator during and that makes a difference. It does. It makes a difference. In a lot of the interviews that we see with fighters, they know it. Jan his English is funny, man. As a Polish person, as a fan, like it's just wholesome. Okay. But it does help. It does help. So my point being that if Ankalaev wins, he takes the interim belt. I see a lot of people comparing him potentially, to Yuri and saying that he's much better as a striker potentially than even Yuri, because Yuri's a little sloppy. You know what I mean? So he takes more risks. And I could see some money flowing in to Magomed, thinking that he's going to reign for quite some time because of that, because of his efficiency, where Yuri doesn't have that. It wouldn't deter me personally as a collector,
Right.
but I do see the market being affected that way. And then I think if Magomed loses, then that market, whatever it was, just tanks completely. Because a lot of these markets for fighters, like if they do not, and I know we're going to touch on this probably a little bit later, but what drives card prices, right? It's potential, it's performance, and then it's personality and engagement with fans. Magomed doesn't have a lot of engagement with fans, and it's no fault of his own, right? Like it's a US market, it's an English speaking market, we get it. But if he loses, then the case to be made for the performance side of the market, that collapses all of a sudden. And I think we could see like the bottom falling out from the Magomed cards, especially the rookies.
Yes, I agree with you 100% there, because I think the key word for that fight is poise. We know that Jan has a poker face, right? He knows how to carry himself through, even though he was hurt a few times that we've seen in the past. But then with Magomed, it truly will dictate where his cards will be going, my perspective. The reason why I say that is Paul Craig choked him out in a triangle with a few seconds
I was
left.
just about to bring that up.
Yeah.
And
Jan
so-
In
can
his
submit.
UFC debut. And I think that's what
right.
set his prices originally. And I think that's why his prices are still a little bit lower than some of the other Russian fighters that have come in and dominated.
Right.
He came into his first fight and in his UFC debut and lost to Paul Craig. So I think that's what really kind of dictated his prices right off the rip.
All right. And then let's jump right into the light heavyweight rematch, or a match against Glover that you guys touched upon. Who do you think, what fight will we see against Glover? Who's going to be fighting Glover?
That's a great question. I mean, regardless of what happens tomorrow, light heavyweight to me is exciting. Rakic is on the mend. He's coming back.
Yes.
We see Jamal Hill. He's looking good, obviously. There's a few other guys that are coming up, and I'll let you guys speak to them. But I think this, I mean, I know it's sad that Yuri got injured, but it's caused a significant shakeup that I did not anticipate, like literally until we heard the news about Yuri. So, I mean, I think this will be good for the division in general. It'll make things a little bit more interesting.
Oh yeah. I think so also. I think we could also see an Alonzo Menafield matchup. There's a couple other guys on that roster that would even see Nikita Krylov and the guys in that division. I think that we could see some interesting matches here against Glover. But I would like to see Jan and Glover go at it one more time, even if it's not for a belt.
Yeah. They made a gentleman's
really
agreement.
Necessary. Yeah.
They made a gentleman's agreement. I think that would be, I would like to see it. It would give Jan a chance to prove himself and to say like, hey, this other thing was a fluke. And maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. Glover is good. Glover is good. And he doesn't look it all the time. Father Time's got a way of catching up with you. But that was an impressive victory. It's left a blemish on Jan's record, I think. He doesn't want to go out like that either. Jan, I'm talking about. So I think the fans would appreciate a rematch, even though some would probably say that, oh, he's going to follow the same game plan. I don't think so. I also think that fight with Yuri took a toll on Glover, because it's hard for anyone to take that much damage in a fight. That was a lot of damage. And Glover showed more heart than I think most light heavyweights could. You've seen every other finish that Yuri's had, right? Guys don't get up and counter strike against somebody that's done that much damage to him. Glover did it. He started to fall apart a little bit here and there on the striking. He started to transition more to taking Yuri down, which was a good move by him, but it took a toll. And I don't know what will happen, but then you can make an argument that if there was a rematch with Glover and Yuri, then the shoulder comes into play too. But I think a Jan Glover rematch to me would be an ideal situation.
Right. Well, let's go on to the next, because we got a few other fighters that we got to talk about, but now talking about the ultimate hype train that was for 2022, Paddy Pimblett. We see Paddy taking on Gordon. Not Gordon Ryan by any means, but Gordon. What do you guys see there?
I'll go ahead. With Patty, I see uh, Jared Gordon. We don't know a whole lot about Jared Gordon. With his previous fights, I mean, he has several fights in the UFC, but I don't really see in his record. I mean, he fought guys like Grant Dawson, Charles Oliveira. He's attained a lot of losses from really high level guys. We haven't seen him against somebody like Patty, I don't think. The thing I like about Patty, though, specifically, is that he always finds a way to win. He's very good at finding a way to win, and he's been rocked several times in the UFC so far. In his three, he's had 3 fights, 3 victories. Always atomic. I mean, it's electrifying. Everything that he does in the cage, he finds a way to pull out a victory. He's a good counter grappler, as we've seen from the Jordan Levitt fight. He's a brawler. We all know how he fights. So I think that it's going to be an interesting matchup. This time around, I'm not really seeing anything explosive coming out of Jared Gordon. I haven't seen a lot of knockout power from him. He is a scrapper. He edges out his wins, and most of his wins have been by decision. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think I'm going to go with Patty on this. I have Patty on this all the way. But anything can happen. It's a fight, and that's why they're doing it.
I'm with you, Roll. I think Patty takes it, but I think this is one of those things where Patty's got an electric personality. He's scrappy in the ring. He's not clean necessarily. He takes hits. He puts himself in dangerous situations, but he comes out on top. Fans appreciate that. A lot of people are saying, well, it's a hype train. It's sure. I mean, it is. Why not? It is. He's popular. He knows how to get the audience behind him. Obviously, he's doing a lot of media. Dana loves him. He's got a lot going for him. And I think even if he wins, it doesn't necessarily, like, no one's going to come out of a Patty win. I think even if he got a knockout in the first punch, no one's going to come out and say this guy's a contender right now. In my opinion, I think that fight, if it were to happen, would be the next one, which is the proof, like prove it, right? That you have it. That fight comes next. So I feel like almost everybody's expecting exactly what we're talking about to happen. He's going to come away with a win. Maybe it's going to be difficult. Maybe it won't. But ultimately, I think most people think that he's going to take that W. I don't think we're going to necessarily see anybody come out of it thinking that he's the next, the truth or anything like that. But his market's great. His market's solid. I don't think Patty winning necessarily moves the needle on his market. The people that are buying in as speculators right now are exactly going to be in the same place if he wins. It's a continuation. It's kind of a deferment. It's kind of like Hamzat versus Holland, right? We didn't see that move the needle too much on Hamzat because that's not the expectation, right? The expectation is champion. With Patty, I think the expectation is a little different. I think it's this guy's going to be around. He's going to be an entertainer. Where we see the needle move is if he beats a contender, he beats a top 10, top 5 guy, then all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, okay, maybe I was wrong, right? Maybe I misjudged. Now, if Patty loses, we see absolute crash in the market. I don't think it would be long-lived. I think people are still going to like his personality, but we see all the speculative money just leave, in my opinion. That's where we see it. And that's not to say the money was like the speculators that are holding Patty cards were thinking he's going to be a champion. They just thought that it would take a lot more for him to lose than it would a Gordon, for example. And that's not to take away from his resume. I'm sure he's going to put up a good fight. I don't see it going, maybe the full, 3 rounds or 5 rounds. I can't recall what it was at this point, ever since it became co-main, but I don't see it ending in the first round. If it does, great. But again, like, he's got more to lose than gain, in my opinion, but it is a stepping stone that he needs to take in his career.
Yeah, 100%. You guys basically drew this nice picture of the fight. Yes, I do see this fight tailored to Patty, right? They're really padding Patty. If you think about it, right, I think his previous fight was much more difficult because he was going against another hyped fighter, Jordan Levitt, excuse me. And that guy proved to be more of a task, I think, than this guy. Because Gordon, if you look at his record, I think for every 3 wins, he has 2 losses. So I don't see this fight necessarily like being a difficult one for Patty to win. Do I want to see more improvement? Yes, but then that's going to mean for him to actually strike, which we don't know Patty as a striker, right? We need to see better mid-range striking. I think more training in that sort of aspect, understanding when to clinch, when not to, because his judo, his fight IQ is actually understated. when it comes to that sort of grappling. So we'll see what happens with that fight. But then let's actually get into a more exciting one, which I'm more ecstatic about. Ilia Topuria versus Thug Nasty Bryce Mitchell. How do you guys see that fight playing out? And what does that mean for the market?
Yeah, no, good call. Then I just want to do a time check. We got about 6 minutes left, you think?
Yeah, I think we got about 10 minutes. It's right now 2:40 my time, 5:40 yours. So cool. Yeah, I got 10 more minutes.
All right, awesome. I didn't think I could be more excited for this fight until after the press conference, and not for the reasons people think. So if you all watch the press conference, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I know we were kind of talking about this before the stream, but I think in this fight, we're going to learn a lot about Ilia Topuria, and probably more so than Bryce Mitchell. And I have Bryce winning. So I know it's a little controversial. I have Bryce winning because I just feel like he's got more ways to win. And we see Ilia Topuria. I don't want to take anything away from him. I mean, he's the matador, right? Like, this guy comes back like after getting punched, getting exposed a little bit sometimes with some fighters. We saw his last fight. That wasn't as easy as a fight as it was made out to be, in my opinion. And to be frank, like, I think he's distracted. Looking at that press conference, he's already thinking about the next fight. Dude, what have we seen when that happens, right? We were talking about Sean Strickland. When I was watching that press conference with Ilia Topuria trying to talk smack with Patty, I'm like, okay, I get it. You're trying to get the payday, but I was like, deja vu. Sean Strickland talking smack to Izzy while he's going to go face Alex. And he looked like an amateur against Alex, honestly.
Right.
And I know Sean's better than that, right? But it just shows you that being distracted going into your fight's not a good idea. I know one fighter that's never distracted like that, and that's Yuri. And like, I just see Ilia trying to prove too much. I feel like he thinks he needs to prove more than Bryce does. And, taking away, like, ignoring all of the flat earth stuff and all that other fun stuff. I do think Bryce it's going to be a war. I think Bryce edges out. He's got more ways to win. That's where my money's at. Now, from a price, like a market perspective, I don't necessarily know what happens to Bryce's market, win or lose. I think if he wins, he probably gets a little bit of that speculative money come his way from the Ilia money that might have been on him as a contender potentially, right? If he loses, I don't see his market tanking too much because a lot of people like him because of his personality. I enjoy some of the videos he puts out. I think it's interesting. I think he's different, the camo shorts and all that. Ilia, a lot of people are like, hey, this guy's going to win no matter what. And look, he showed toughness in his last fight. He showed toughness, and I was surprised. And he came back like in violent fashion. But that was never supposed to happen in that fight. So given that, I feel like if he wins, the market stays the way it is because those expectations are priced in. I think if he loses, we see a fall from grace. And we've seen that with a lot of the 2022 Prism rookie cards. We've seen that with some of those rookies, right? Where it's like, there's just a lot of speculative money going in because people like to gamble on some of these fighters that are newer and they've had some success. But I do think that this is going to be another one of those scenarios where if he loses, we see the market fall apart.
Okay. I like that. Pretty exhausted.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think it's more of a risk for Ilia as far as the card market goes. He's calling out Bryce Mitchell. We haven't seen a lot from Ilia as far as being in the UFC. He's fought guys like Jai Herbert. He's fought Ryan Hall, for example. But, I mean, these really aren't benchmark fighters where we're looking to see who he can beat. These are guys who he's just happened to beat. I think Bryce Mitchell is a complete Swiss Army knife. He has so many tools in his arsenal. He's got great precision striking. He has great wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I think he's going to use all those tools and find a way to win against Ilia. I see an Ilia victory possibly from a KO, but I'm going to 100% go with Bryce Mitchell on this fight. I think he has more heart. I don't know what else there is to say, but I think Ilia does face adversity very well. As we've seen, he's been knocked down quite a few times in his previous fights. Very quick. So if he uses those striking tools against Bryce, we could see a KO victory, but I'm thinking that Bryce is going to win either by decision or submission.
Yeah. And by the way, if I don't own a single Ilia card, if Ilya wins this fight, I might see myself picking up a few.
All right. I want to be quick about this one because we also got to talk about Curtis and that Joaquin Buckley fight. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm going to go against you guys on this one. I see Ilya winning. The reason why I actually state that is we haven't seen his defensive grappling yet, or put on display, but we kind of overlooked that he actually won, I think, the first 10 of his fights, or I forget the number of them. But when he actually debuted his professional MMA career, he was winning by subs. He was chasing after subs. It wasn't pulling guard like what you see with Paul Craig or with Ryan Hall. He was actually shooting for takedowns, and he was hunting for the sub. And I think that because that's his nature, and that he's actually built upon that striking, it's kind of like the opposite of what GSP did. I'm not saying he's a GSP by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm trying to say is that he has, I feel, more tools in his kit. But let's actually get into the Joaquin Buckley fight. Where do you guys see it happening there?
Blood.
Go ahead.
I see this being extremely explosive. This fight will be taking place in a phone booth. I think both of these guys, as we saw with Chris Curtis, he was frustrated with the distance that Jack Hermanson created. So I think Joaquin Buckley's kind of under the same, kind of has that same style with the heavy hands. Extremely well-rounded fighter, in my opinion, as far as Buckley goes. Great footwork, and I think that Chris Curtis is going to struggle with the power of Joaquin Buckley. And if Joaquin Buckley decides to put him on the ground, I think Chris Curtis will end up there. Chris Curtis has a good ability to box. Yeah, I probably a controversial opinion. He has a good ability to box, and I think he has good body work. So I'm going with Joaquin Buckley on this fight. I think that he's a stronger opponent. I think he probably would, not to go into it too far, but I think that if he cuts to 170, he's going to be a problem at welter.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
Oh no, Paul, you go ahead, please.
Oh, I was gonna say I was all aboard the Curtis hype train until the Hermanson fight. That was so disappointing. Like I'm gonna need to see a lot more for like at least 2 more fights from Curtis before I get back on that train. Like you cannot complain because your opponent planned effectively against you. Like that, no, that like really, come on. And Hermanson was a gentleman about it too, by the way. So it's yeah, I think Joaquin Buckley is going to bring it. I think Curtis, I don't think he has the same heart, and he doesn't have what it takes to like switch things up when things don't go his way. And I'm only saying that based on the Hermanson fight, but that fight was so informative to me as a fan that I'm like, okay, he's not going to adapt. It's just not going to happen. And Buckley, he's got the heart, he's got the drive. Like this guy's crazy. And to your point, Jake, I think it is going to be a fight in the phone booth. I think the fans win here, regardless of how this comes out. It's going to potentially be the fight of the night. I'm just excited for it. I don't know which way it's going to go, but if I had to bet one way or the other, I would go with Buckley.
Right on. Actually, let's leave some time for closing thoughts. So let's wrap it all up. I mean, where do you see the UFC card market like taking off with this fight, and just overall with 2022 coming to a close? Jake, would you mind starting off?
Yeah, no, I see in this card in particular, there's going to be some, there's potential for upset in the card market. I think, especially with Magomed, if we're looking at Magomed, we're looking at Patty, Ilya, Bryce, there's a lot to lose here for these guys, and especially for the card market. I think it can really, it can point the needle in one direction. It's going to be a volatile card, especially for the card market. And I don't know, I don't have much to comment on that, but Paul, I'd like to hear what I'd like to hear from you on this.
Yeah, I think you've definitely, you're touching on what my thoughts are, which is basically that established fighters that are going into this card, we're not going to see their card markets move that much up or down. They might move a little bit up with a win. They're not going to move too much down for the loss. I think the rookies have a lot more to lose. I think the expectations are very high on them. I think if Ilya loses, big impact. Patty loses, big impact. Magomed loses, big impact. Which, and it kind of that is what rookie cards are, right? Like it's not the same as like some of these other situations that we've seen with some of these other bigger rookies like Hamzat, where there's really no doubt. And you look at the betting line and it's obvious, right? These are a lot closer from a betting line perspective, from a public perspective, even from our perspective, right? And there's a lot more to lose there. And what's interesting to me is we've just seen the Optic checklist come out for 2022 Donruss Optic. The downtowns, those are going to be big cards, and there's only 10, and Patty's one of them, by the way. So right. I see Patty winning. I see the card market for new products staying relatively healthy, almost exclusively on the back of Patty, because a lot of this product has Patty rookies in it. I see potentially also like another shift here. If Ilya wins, we see maybe a little bit of depending on how he wins, right? Because if he's super hyper dominant, we might see a little bit of a bump in 2022 Prism, maybe. But overall, I think the biggest thing that's going to impact the card market is going to be how Patty performs. Honestly, that's the biggest.
Yeah, I definitely see that as well. I mean, with Yuri being out, this card actually just rides on Patty's shoulders. I mean, a bit on Ilya as well, and a bit on Bryce, but then more so on Patty. And Dana White has made it a point that he wants people to get more into this hobby, right? If you see within the UFC handle itself, fighters signing away at the next Immaculate, right? So he wants people to get more, to have more vested interest and more to, and just to have actually invest into this hobby more. So I think what you guys touched upon with personality, I mean, that's the reason why we got caught up talking about this guy who doesn't know how to train his dog properly, how to, go to the restroom. I think that what's interesting is we just can't have Patty lose. That's right. But if we do, if he does lose, then we could actually buy cards on the cheap.
That's fair. That's fair. And maybe one other thought I want to add to that, Jiho, is look, if you are speculating on cards, and there's a lot of cards that I speculate on, there's a lot of cards that I PC. If you are speculating on cards, know why you are doing it and be prepared to basically bear the consequences of that. Because it's either personality based, performance based. It could be both, but it's going to be one of those two at a minimum, right? And if your fighter is performance based, like a Magomed Ankalaev or an Ilya Topuria, I would argue, right? Then if they lose, you've got nothing else to fall on. I think with Patty, we could see a resurgence, a comeback story, that kind of thing. Obviously still hurt because we just talked about how big of an impact he would have on the 22 market for Panini product. But yeah, just those are the things. And I think that's a recurring theme that we'll talk about in the future is what are speculators betting on, right? Like what are collectors investing in? What do they like about a fighter when they're buying those cards? Roll, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think from an investment standpoint, you are collecting the rookies thinking with the pocketbook. Whereas if you're collecting guys like Jan and some of these veterans, I mean, you're collecting from the heart, and really that's what sets that aside. And you have to go in, like you said, knowing why you're collecting this fighter. I think you go into collecting a Patty type card because of the electrifying theatrics, and that's really what it is. It's there's going to be a difference on why you're collecting fighters, certain fighters, and that's really all I have to say about that. Trying to close it up here because I know that Jiho's got to get going, and I do too. So getting lost in my thoughts. I'm looking at the time tick by, but that's all I have for my closing thoughts. Jiho, Paul,
this was fun.
I think this was, even though we had that hiccup in the beginning, I'm glad this is our first show. I hope the viewers did too. Let us know what your thoughts are. Reach out to us. You can obviously know us on Instagram or on whatnot, and let us know your thoughts because we'd love to also get some good feedback so we can make sure that this experience gels well for everyone.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about more things. Like we'll be here talking about cards. We're going to be here talking about the market. We're going to be here talking about shenanigans that are happening in the market, good, the bad, the ugly, blood, sweat, and wax.
Yep. All right. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.